Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Ashok Lavasa pulls out of poll panel meetings on model code. Even before we understand what this issue is all about, let's understand how the EC functions currently. Let's look at the present composition of the Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India is a three-member body. It consists of the Chief Election Commissioner, which is currently Sunil Arora, and it also has two other election commissioners. So who are these two other election commissioners? One we have is Ashok Lavasa, the other one is Sushil Chandra. Now let's flip through the history pages. Has the Election Commission of India been a multi-member body from the very beginning? The answer to this is no. It has not been a multi-member body from the beginning. It was a single member body from its composition in the year 1950. So in the year 1950, it was a single member body up until 15th of October 1989. From when it was set up in the year 1950 up until 15th of October 1989, it has been a single member body with a chief election commissioner. But from 16th of October 1989 up to 1st of January 1990, it became a three-member body with RVS Perry Sastry as the chief election commissioner and SS Dono as well as Segal as the election commissioners. Why was this increased? That was because of the amendment that was made in the constitution where the adult franchise was reduced to 18 years from about 21 years. So because it was reduced, the work for the election commission had increased. In order to overcome the work pressure, the election commission was increased from a single member body to three-member body. Again, from 2nd January 1990 to 30th September 1990, it again started functioning as a single member commission. But eventually, from 1st October 1993 till today, it has been a three-member commission. Now, there are decisions that are taken up by the Election Commission. These decisions are with respect to the Model Code of Conduct enforcement, when the election has to take place, and so on. There are multiple issues that the Election Commission has to undergo, and all these decisions are taken by consensus, and this is on the basis of unanimity. So the Election Commission has been advised that you as a poll panel will have to take all these decisions on unanimity basis. So you have three people, all you three people come up together, reach a consensus, build a common platform, and then decide on the basis of unanimity. This is how the Election Commission works. But there are times where the Election Commission may not work on unanimity. These three election commissioners will have differences of the opinion. These differences of opinion will have to be sorted out, but these issues cannot be sorted out at times. It is at this particular moment the Election Commission's rules has laid a picture. According to section 10, subclause 3 of the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioner conditions of the Service Amendment Act of 1993, it has clearly gone on to say that if the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners differ in opinion for any matter whatsoever with respect to the elections, such matter shall be decided according to the opinion of the majority. So what is the majority here? The majority here is on the basis of 2:1. So when we say 2:1, it means there are two election commissioners who have the same view and there is another person with a minority view. So what will take the precedent here? Those two people who have given the majority view, that will be taken, and this decision will be complied by and will be enforced. So irrespective of who is in the majority or the minority, it is the majority opinion which will be enforced. So the point to be understood here is usually the Election Commission or the poll panel wants these commissioners to have a unanimous decision. They want it to come up with a consensus based decision, but in the absence of it, with differences of opinion, it goes with the majority view. Now let's look into the current context. According to few reports that have been surfacing on the online forums, Ashok Lavasa has opted out of the decision making meetings on all the Model Code of Conduct since May 4. Why? Because he claims his minority decisions were going unrecorded. What do we mean by it? It means that the dissent that has been expressed by Ashok Lavasa has not been recorded, and at the same time this has not been put on the public forum. Let me explain this minority dissent with reference to a particular case study. Let's go back to the Sabrimala case. The Sabrimala case judgment was delivered. There was a majority view, there was a minority view as well. The judgment was in the ratio 4:1. So while all this judgment was laid in front of the public, there was majority view where all these statements was put up in the public domain. Then there was minority view which was also delivered by Indu Malhotra. Indu Malhotra had a minority view, and this view was also put up in the public forum. So the public in general were able to read what was the arguments that was given by the majority. They were also able to read why Indu Malhotra dissented and what was her view with reference to Sabrimala. So what it means is both majority as well as the minority view was presented before the general public. What Ashok Lavasa says here is, in this particular case, his views was not presented to the general public. It means only the majority view was presented to the general public. The minority view which Ashok Lavasa came about was not presented to the general public. He says that all those speeches that were made by Prime Minister were not according to rules that was laid by the Election Commission. So the Election Commission should have sent a notice to Prime Minister Modi that his poll campaign speeches are not in accordance with the Election Commission instructions. Thereby, this would restrict his tempo as well as act as a cautionary note in the future. Was this taken up by the Election Commission? No. This is what he says, that Election Commission's minority view was suppressed and was not out in the general domain. So what he says is, we will have to look at certain comments. So accordingly, Lavasa says, I am being forced to stay away from the meetings of the full commission since minority decisions are not being recorded. To this, the Chief Election Commissioner says that the three members of the ECI are not expected to be a template or a clones of each other. There have been so many times in the past where there have been a vast diversion of views, as it can and should be. But the same largely remained within the confines of the Election Commission of India after demission of offices, unless appearing much later in a book written by the concerned Election Commissioner or the Chief Election Commissioners. I have personally never shied away from a public debate whenever required, but there is a time for everything. There was a reason, which is to see that the election process is through instead of creating ill-timed controversies. So what can be drawn from the present context? With this elections fought on religion, diatribe, rant, name calling, and EC ideally should have been an impartial instrumentalist in the conduction of elections. But few say, and the opposition parties also call it, a biased election commission. Now it is time to think over the reforms in the election commission and the mode of appointment. Only time will decide whether this reform with respect to the election commission will be concluded. As of now, this is all we have to understand. This article here is speaking about Ponnaiyar River. Let's look into some of the key facts which are very important for your preliminary examination. The South Pennar River, which is also called as Dakshina Pinakini in Kannada and Tenpanai or Ponnaiyar in Tamil. The river originates in Nandi Hills in Chikbalapur district of Karnataka, and it flows through Tamil Nadu before emptying into Bay of Bengal. Small dams of Kelavarapalli and Krishnagiri dams are built across this river near places of Hosur as well as Krishnagiri. The sand build of this river is quite impressive, suggesting that it may have been a perennial river with much larger flow in the past. Mention of river is also found in Sangam as well as in medieval history. Because this dam has large concentration of sand, it is a breeding ground for sand mafia. So this river is also a place which has provided a breeding ground for sand mafia as well. Moving on, let's look into the next article. This article is very important from your cultural aspect. Let's look into some of the important facts with respect to Jama Masjid. It is also called as Masjid-i-Jahanuma, which means world reflecting mosque. It was built by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. Its architectural style is Islamic. The mosque is designed by architect Ustad Khalil. The mosque was completed in 1656 AD with three gates, four towers, two 40-meter high minarets constructed with the strips of red sandstone as well as the white. The three domes that you see in the picture are also present on the terrace, which are surrounded by two minarets. The architectural plan of Badshahi Masjid, kindly remember this Badshahi Masjid was built by Shah Jahan's son Aurangzeb, and this is currently in Pakistan, which happens to be similar to that of Jama Masjid that is in India. This article says $150 million World Bank loan likely for rebuild Kerala. What is the context? The World Bank is going to have talks with the Kerala government as well as with the Union Department of Economic Affairs, which will secure its developmental policy loan of about 150 million for the Rebuild Kerala initiative. Let's understand what this article is all about. This loan will be provided by the World Bank to Kerala to recover from its devastating floods in the year 2018, which led to human as well as infrastructural losses. This loan will therefore help Kerala to overcome the monetary deficit and help in faster recovery after its devastating floods that it saw in the year 2018. Now let's try and understand what this developmental policy loan is all about. Developmental policy loan is one of those loans which are provided by the World Bank to the state government as well as the central government. There are n number of issues in the society. This includes education, health, infrastructure and so on. All these infrastructural projects as well as social infrastructure projects will require money. This money, when given by the World Bank at a very zero or low interest rates, such is called as the developmental policy loan. This amount, when provided by the World Bank to a respective country, it will have long-term repayments including a term of 5 to 10-year grace period. What is of importance under this developmental policy loan is that it is not project specific. There are two types of loans that are provided by the World Bank. One is called as the project specific, the other is also called as the general loans. When it comes to the project specific loans, these are continuously monitored by the World Bank. The World Bank would have given this particular money, let's say for example the infrastructure sector, or let's say it is for the education sector. So it continuously monitors whether the host country which has taken this money is implementing the program in the required framework. But when it is under the developmental policy loan, there will be no monitoring whatsoever. So the money will be delivered to the host country and this money can be used for any purpose whatsoever. The purpose may include the education, it may include the health sector, it can include the infrastructure. So it is not on a specific project, but the money collected by the host country can be used for number of issues to address the developmental issue. So this developmental policy loan is a loan that is provided which is aimed at helping all those states to increase the developmental spending on some of the basic social services like the education, the health, safety net for the poor, as well as building critical infrastructure for the economy. So with this aid provided by the World Bank, it will provide the Kerala government. Once approved, the state can use the money for achieving targets that are set under the Rebuild Kerala initiative. So the Kerala government here will use the money provided by the World Bank to create and build a new Kerala. This article says, what is India's stand on data storage? The dawn of the information age has opened up great opportunities for the beneficial use of data. Data is the fuel of the economy. It is users' information and their preferences and their likes. This is very advantageous for the society as well as for the economy in grooming the economy as well as giving boost to the economy. But this has also enhanced the dangers, the perils of unregulated and arbitrary use of personal data. Unauthorized leaks, as we have seen in the newspaper with respect to the Aadhaar as well as the recent Ayushman Bharat scheme as well. Then there is hacking. Let's take a simple example of Zomato. Certain user preferences, their likes for the food was compromised a year back, which eventually Zomato told it was not hacked as well. But there are cyber crimes as well, like the ransomware, which have rendered databases very vulnerable to data manipulation. So data can be advantageous, and if it is not monitored, it is not having a vigilant eyes on it, it can become a problem as well. So there is a conflict between the massive scope for the progress provided by the digital era and the fear of loss of individual autonomy as well. So it is in this backdrop that data localization pictures in. What is data localization that this article speaks about? Data localization law refers to the regulations that dictate how data on a nation citizen is collected, processed and stored inside the country. So what it means is all the data of its citizens, the people living within this country, how it has to be regulated, what are the rules that will have to be framed, whether this data is regulated within the country or we can export the data to some other country. If it is being exported to some other country, how is it being regulated? Is the right to privacy being monitored? All these rules and regulations is what is the focus point of data localization. So as the point denotes, it is the data of the users, the likes and preferences of the people, and this data, when it is used within the country, when it is localized within the domains of the country, is what is called as data localization. Now the point that we have to understand is, why is data very important? Does it really matter where data resides? Should it be within the country or can it also be outside the country? It is this point that we have to focus on. Let's look at some of the key arguments that have been put up by Justice Sri Krishna Committee. The first key important argument is data localization is critical for law enforcement. There are a number of law enforcement agencies in India. These are constantly monitoring security threats. There can be a person, there can be an institution or an organization which can be a security threat. These people might have communicated on the social platforms. Let's say, for example, Facebook or through some other channels as well. These are important evidences, but these security agencies cannot take up these evidences immediately by Facebook. Why? Because this is not India based and all its data is present in United States of America. So for a law enforcement agency to pick up this evidence, this particular details, it has to go through multiple channels. So what are the channels? It has to approach the central government. The central government of India will approach the United States of America's federal government. The federal government of United States of America will then approach the Facebook. Then Facebook will eventually deliver the information. So what it means is, it is a long process. It is a diplomatic process which will take number of days. But during this particular process, all this information can become obsolete as well, and this information may not serve the purpose. So the delay for the law enforcement can become a security threat to the number of people as well as the country. So what Justice Sri Krishna Committee says is that data localization is very important. Why? Because if this data was present in the boundaries of India, they need not have to go through all this process, and this data will have to be immediately provided by whichever company that is present within the precincts of India. So what it says is, this data localization is very important to prevent undue delay because of this diplomatic process that has been endured through. Then data transfer is also dependent on technology and channels such as undersea fiber optic cable network. What this statement basically means is that when there is transfer of data within the precincts of the country, the infrastructure is fair and fine because it is constantly being monitored by the government. But when there is transfer of data from the native country to another country, there can be a few places where this data can be destroyed. Why? Because the undersea fiber cable network can be destroyed by third and alternative forces. When this happens, all the data, all the information that is passed from the home country to another country is destroyed. What it means is, in case the native country requires such a data, we will not have, because there is physical breakdown of this entire network. So in order to overcome this issue, the Justice Sri Krishna committee has also said that at least one copy of this data must be stored in India. Therefore, even if that data which was originally present, even if it is destroyed, this data, which is a copy that we have, will help in storing of this information, which can help at times of adversity. Another key observation that was made by Sri Krishna committee says that it is very ideal to have all the data of the Indian citizens to be stored only locally without even having any copy whatsoever abroad. This is to protect the Indian data from foreign surveillance. As we had discussed in Cambridge Analytica issue, there were few people who had given their details. These details was used by a foreign firm, and it was able to manufacture content and also bring in a state of affairs where democracy was controlled. So what it means is that there is constant foreign surveillance. This is a threat to the sovereignty of the country. So as a result, what the Sri Krishna committee says is that there have been issues. These issues have to be addressed. For all this, what we need is data localization. So user preferences, user likes should not be present in some other country, but instead it should be present within the boundaries of India. Now let's look at the laws that are currently present in India with respect to the data protection. As a law which is currently present, what we have is the only law, that is Reserve Bank of India for payment systems. This is the only law which says and speaks about data protection. However, there are other bills as well as drafts. What are these? One we have is the Justice Sri Krishna committee report. Then we have the draft personal data protection bill as well as the draft e-commerce bill. So the only law that we currently have is the Reserve Bank of India for payment system, which is also being implemented. These are all bills and drafts which are not implemented but are supposed to be executed, but are waiting for public comments as well as consultation. One of the beautiful points that is also put up in the e-commerce policy is that, let's take a simple example of Facebook. The Facebook is headquartered in United States of America. It has its child organization which is present in India. So the parent organization is present in United States of America. The child organization is present in India. So this child organization can transfer data from India to United States of America. However, a third party cannot use this information. So Facebook cannot give all these data of the Indian citizens to another third party, even with the user's consent. This is one of the important points that is also mentioned in the draft e-commerce policy. So with all these issues in the limelight, India is looking at data localization, which means all data of Indian citizens should be restricted within the boundaries of India, and Indian citizens' data cannot be moved abroad. As a result of which, there are certain concerns that have been voiced by the foreign companies. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg recently expressed certain apprehensions about all those nations wanting to store data locally. According to him, it may give rise to possibilities where authoritarian governments would have access to data for possible misuse. So what he says is, when people are giving their data to Facebook, it means they trust Facebook. There are terms and conditions that they comply by, and they give their data to Facebook. And Facebook as an institution is monitoring this data, and it is making sure it is protected. But when this data is stored locally, it means it comes under the influence of the government. And when it comes under the influence of the government, the authoritarian governments may misuse this data, and all the trust that people had posted in Facebook will be violated. So the first key concern is that data can be misused by the government. Another major disadvantage for the company is that it costs over a period of time increases. This can be in the form of servers, the UPS that it will have to provide, the generators, the cooling costs, the building and the personnel. Currently, all this is provided in the headquarters, but if the same have to be implicated in the native country, it means the cost of it increases. Let's take a simple example. Large e-commerce players in India like the Amazon also say say that costs may go up to 10 to 50% depending on how stringent the laws is. Again, the e-commerce company says that the cost may go up to 10 to 50% depending on the laws that are present in the future. Apart from this, they also say when we look at the infrastructure sector in India currently, the infrastructure is not ready enough in India to make sure that all this is being taken care of. The infrastructure in India is at a poor quality. This will have to be matched up to the international standards. Because India does not have such international standards of infrastructure, again the cost for the company will boost up and their losses will increase with time and the profits will be minimized. As a result, these are the various concerns that have been voiced by the companies. Now let's look at laws the world over. Let's look at some of the key important countries and how they come up with their own process of data localization. Let's take the example of Canada and Australia. They protect their health data very carefully. So health data will not be exported from their country to other countries, so they're very cautious about the health details. Then we have Vietnam as well as China, which have their own rules as well. There, more preference is given to government control over the data than individuals' privacy. Then there are other set of countries like the Brazil, Japan, Korea, New Zealand, which have put up their own data protection laws. Then there is Chile, which has also announced that it is planning to come up with an independent data protection authority very soon. Then there is Argentina, which is also currently reforming its privacy legislation. And what is also of importance is United States of America has no single data protection law at its federal level. So this is how it is world over. So what has been the international response with respect to adaptation of data localization in India? The United States of America has criticized this data localization move by India, where it says that it is the most discriminatory and trade distortive. And when it comes to the European Union, it has said that its response to India's data protection draft bill appear both unnecessary and potentially harmful, as they would create unnecessary costs, difficulties, uncertainties, and would hamper the business and investments. So this is what we need to understand with respect to this article. This article says Hornbills among top seed dispensers most threatened. Let's look into the context. Researchers from the National Conservation Foundation in Mysore carried out a study in the Pakhe Tiger Reserve in Arunachal Pradesh. So kindly remember, the Pakhe Tiger Reserve is in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. They went on a study to understand the behavior of the birds and its food habits in reference to the fruits. So these researchers have mapped different frugivores, that is fruit eater birds, and their interactions that are important for the ecosystem in the forest. Now let's look into the details of this article. A single bird species will visit multiple plants within that forest ecosystem. Then a single plant will have multiple birds coming up to this particular plant ecosystem and feeding on this particular plant. So on this particular basis, the trees were classified into three segments. What are these? One is a small tree, the other one is a medium tree, as well as the large seeded tree. The large seeded trees were mainly dependent on these hornbills as well as the imperial pigeons for their dispersal. What do we mean by it? You have the bird comes up on these large seed trees and they disperse this particular fruit in and around that particular area. Then you also have the medium seeded trees that are also prevalent in this region, which are visited by a number of birds like the bulbuls, the barbets, along with hornbills as well as imperial pigeons. So what these researchers came to a conclusion is that the large seeded trees as well as the medium sized seeded trees both required hornbills. And these hornbills are one of the large sized frugivores, and these are the most top seed dispensers. So what is the advantage with the hornbills? That they were able to disperse these fruits in and around that forest ecosystem. The hornbills here, they swallow the entire fruit as a whole without causing any damage to the seed. Therefore, they are known to disperse seeds far off away from the parent plant. What do we mean by it? Let's say this is a plant. So you have the birds coming up in this particular area. Let's take the example of the pigeon. So the pigeon here tries to eat the fruit, and the seed that it is collected will be dispersed off within this particular area itself. So what happens within this particular region is there is competition with respect to the seed. You have insects, earthworms, many other organisms coming up and feeding on the seed. But when it comes to the hornbill, it is taking up the entire gulp of the seed and it is able to disperse it elsewhere as well. So other birds which are feeding on these important fruits are dispersing it within the parent plant, but the hornbills are able to disperse not only within the parent plant but elsewhere as well. With this, what the hornbill has been able to do is it is able to make sure that this particular plant is spread in and around that particular forest system. Another key important point from the prelims perspective is about the green hornbill. The IUCN status of green hornbill is vulnerable. The great hornbill is also the state bird of Kerala as well as Arunachal Pradesh. This article further speaks about certain threats that have been faced by the hornbills. The hornbills are hunted for their meat, and the flesh of these birds is said to have some medicinal value. The beaks of these birds as well as the head and the skull of these birds are used in the charms to ward off evil spirits. Further, tribesmen in the part of northeastern India as well as in Borneo use the feathers for headdresses, and the skulls are also often worn as decorations. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. Let's look at some of the prelims practice questions. Consider the following with respect to the Netravati River. It flows in the state of Karnataka. It drains into Bay of Bengal. Which of the above statements are incorrect? The answer for this is 2 only. Why? Because the statement here is asking for incorrect. Let's look into the explanation. This river has its origins at Bangra Balige Valley, Yelanuru Ghat in Kudremukh in Chikmagalur district of Karnataka. The river flows through the famous pilgrimage place of Dharmasthala. It merges with Kumaradhara River at Uppinangadi before flowing to Arabian Sea. So the incorrect statement here is it drains into Bay of Bengal. Why? Because it does not drain into Bay of Bengal, but instead it is the Arabian Sea. Let's look into the next question. Consider the following statements. The state of Hyderabad was founded by Nizam ul Mulk Asif Jah. He was one of the leading nobles of post Aurangzeb. He openly declared his independence from the central government, but in practice he acted like an independent ruler. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Let's look into the explanation. The first two statements are correct. The third statement says he never openly declared his independence from the central government, but in practice he acted like an independent ruler. Let's look into the map-based question. Which of the following countries border Vietnam? Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, China and Cambodia. The answer for this is 2, 4 and 5 only. Let's look into the explanation. So Vietnam is bordered by Laos, China as well as Cambodia. Let's look into the previous year question paper. Priority sector lending by banks in India constitutes the lending to agriculture, micro and small enterprises, weaker sections. The answer to this is all of the above. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.